We are here with the JPMorgan Chairman and CEO, JPMorgan Chase on IDAD, Jamie Dimon. Thank you so much for your time this morning. You and I are both watching the Bloomberg television here, kind of parsing together what's happening in the Middle East. But on top of what we had in London overnight, a third terrorist attack, the market seemed fairly sanguine. Oil price up a little bit, about 1% right now, Brent crude. But it seems as though the global markets are pretty sanguine to these kinds of geopolitical shocks. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Steve, happy to be here. Welcome. I just heard about this from you guys, so it's hard for me to tell you a lot about it. I do think it has significance, what's happening there, but I think history has taught us that very often things like this are a lot of news, they're very important humanitarian, they don't necessarily affect the global economy. And so markets tend to react to the global economy if they expect something good or bad. So, we'll see how it unfolds, though.
Yeah, you just came back from the Middle East, though. What was your overall impression, though, of what's happening there?
Yeah, well, it was good. I mean, I thought, I was in Riyadh when a lot of the CEOs there and the president was there. I think Saudi Arabia is making a lot of changes.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. You have to respect people when they try to go from one position to another. They have 20% of their parliaments and women, and as women now, and they want to change their economy. So, we applaud people making it and acknowledge how hard it is for, very ingrained cultures to try to change something like that.
Now let's talk to this part of the world. You just gave a fireside chat. What was your main message to the 2,200 delegates that are here at the Global China Summit?
Yeah, so China, this is the 13th. So the first one, I think we had like 100 or 200 people here in 20 companies. This one is 2,000 plus people and 200 or 300 companies. Since I've become in China, it's had enormous growth. I think the main message about China was you could predict the future 20 years from now much easier than you can predict the next 12 months.
Yeah.
So you guys spent a lot of time in 12 months, but 20 years from now, they'll house 35% of the Fortune 3,000, and that we should build for that. They've made huge progress in reforms, financial reforms, market reforms, but they're going to have it's going to have tough times, and we should all understand that. That's true for every single country that's gone from an emerging market to a developing country to a developed country.
And what is JP Morgan's presence going to be here in those 20 years? Because you've just gotten out of your joint venture 50-50 partnership with First Capital. Yeah. What's next?
So remember, JP Morgan, we do a lot of business with Chinese companies outside of here.
Yes.
And in Hong Kong, and a lot of multinationals coming here. So we had a very good joint venture, but the hope is that we could do something that's maybe even more important. But my longer term dream is that we own 100% of something, not 51%. I think joint ventures by their nature have sloppy corporate governance, and that it looks like a full-scale global corporate investment bank. We could do equity, debt, bond trading, M&A, capital advice right here in Shanghai and Beijing.
But they don't allow that right now. So what are you hearing in your probably protracted conversations with regulators?
They allow pieces. So that 49% joint venture we have, we can do some. If we get another joint venture, maybe we can do it. We're hoping to get a license to be able to trade corporate bonds and be a lead underwriter. So look, we want reform, but we know they have to go at their own measured pace. It is complicated. And so we respect that, and we tell them what we would like, but hopefully it'll happen. I'm very comforted by the fact that when President Xi and President Trump met, forget all the rhetoric aside in the campaign, they actually came up with this comprehensive economic dialogue, a continuation of what they did before. They announced that they want a small trade deal of 10 items, but they're going to have another one after 100 days, and then maybe one after a year. So that shows dialogue, conversation, ongoing dialogue, which I think is the way it should be done. Sit down, talk about the issues you have. There are serious issues on both sides, and then do something intelligent about it.
I know your priority would be to break down some of these barriers in financial services. How important is it on the Trump agenda as well to hammer that home? Because I would assume that you got out of the 50-50 joint venture in your securities firm with First Capital, that you want 100%, but it doesn't allow that. Would you go into another JV at 50-50?
If it had the right licenses and we had a certain amount of management control, that makes sense. So, and so I think it is important. Remember, the financial reform is important for China. So forget JP Morgan for a second. When you talk about state-owned enterprises and corruption and market reform, they're all related. So if you have a bond market, they have the third largest bond market in the world today, but it's much less transparent than the American bond market. When foreign investors come in, investors can sometimes be a little bit of a pain. On the other hand, they demand transparency, they demand governance, they demand bankruptcy laws. So JP Morgan can play a part in helping set very high standards for governance, transparency, equity, what's inside some of these wealth management products, give consumers more choice, give individual investors more choice, and those things are really important for the developing nation. But it's important for China. Whether JPMorgan is there or not, they're going to need to do that to become what they want to become.
Do you think you'll have another JV on the securities front by the end of this year?
Eventually. Yeah. I don't know the timing, but eventually.
Are you happy with the pace of reform and opening up, or are you losing patience?
No, we're very patient, but I always want it tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
But obviously they have to look at it. It's going to be part of trade, so they're not going to do what we want. But we have good conversations with the Chinese officials. They understand, and again, we have to also make the argument why it's good for China. They need to do what's right for China as China develops and grows, not just what's good for JPMorgan. So, and we appreciate that.
How about reform in the foreign exchange market as well? They've just added this counter-cyclical factor in the daily fixing mechanism. Some would say that this is exerting more control at a time when they're talking about relaxing those controls. How do you see it?
I think this is all being blown out of proportion. It is not a convertible currency.
Yes.
And therefore it's not going to float like other currencies. And they do stuff with the currency in the marketplace, but they've actually been making it go up, not down. So all the rhetoric is about making it go down to have a trade benefit, to have a trade advantage over the trade partners, and that just isn't the truth. They worry about all the trade partners, and over time, as to become a convertible currency, and that's a ways away, you have to be able to freely buy and sell RMB and the assets underlying that. And you can't do that here. And I'm not saying it would be irresponsible of them to do it overnight. So I think people are blowing out of proportion their control of the currency. That's kind of part of capital controls. And until they get out of, they have full convertibility, they're going to have some form of that.
Yeah, I mean, the time frame probably, 5 years ago I heard it was going to be 3 years, 5 years. It's probably 10 years out now.
Oh, I think it's 5 to 10 years, yeah.
And
but you've seen they've created a real bond market, a real muni market. You can short CDS. They have the Bond Connect, the Stock Exchange Connect. They've created more investment products. They've opened up mutual fund businesses. I'm talking about over 5 and 10 years.
Yes.
That is what they need to do. They need to just take it to the next level. And it's going to be lots of little steps. That when you look back, you'll say, my God, they have full market reform.
Yeah, there's a lot of little steps.
Like even bankruptcy rules.
Yeah.
You need clear, but they've let a couple of companies go bankrupt.
Yeah.
So even that starts to instill market discipline, and so they're on their path.
Because there's also a bunch of little tea readings that you have to do. You get these CBRC circulars that come out every once in a while alluding to that they're going to open up the regulations for locally incorporated foreign funded banks to do investment banking here, but we don't know how that's going to be implemented. But we also have the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. Is that under that framework, is that something you would look at doing a joint venture if the terms were right?
Yes. Yeah. We'll look at all that. We want to be here. We want a full investment bank, and so we look at all of that.
Okay, so how about climate change? Is China going to take the lead now? You've come out, obviously, against what President Trump has done in pulling out of the Paris Accord.
Right. Yeah, I think I would have preferred staying in. What's going to change climate is not just acknowledging it and having governments agree, but it's technology. Someone wrote a great article in the paper saying consumers want to stop climate change, but they're unwilling to pay a CO2 tax. The real way to do it is a CO2 tax, a carbon tax, and so. We're in favor of trying to control carbon, and I wish they had stayed in, but I think another reporter made an argument, the reason to stay in is just to show you're collaborating. Yeah. The collaboration is a good thing between nations, it's not a bad thing, and obviously the Trump administration felt differently about that, but we wish they'd stayed in.
What's your view then on staying on the Business Advisory Council? We've had Elon Musk and Bob Iger say they disagree with the climate change position and they've taken themselves off it. You will stay on?
Yeah. Look, I am an American patriot, and I want to help the President of the United States. When someone is piloting the airplane, you want to root for the pilot, so I want to help them as best they can. It is very hard if you say, I'm going to go off an advisory group or not do ABC, because you disagree on one issue. Honestly, no one's going to agree with any president or prime minister everywhere on every issue. So I don't want to overreact to it.
But how much did you lobby him?
Well, we signed letters with a bunch of other CEOs, the Business Roundtable. So people made it very clear what they preferred. But he chose differently, and that's his prerogative.
How about other areas that maybe you disagree? TPP, is that something, his withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Look, I was in favor of TPP, and I hope it may come back in some form or fashion. But like I said, I'm very comforted by the fact that Wilbur Ross and Steve Mnuchin are negotiating, as we speak, additional trade agreements with China. And I hear that they want to do something with NAFTA. I'd be very much in favor of that. We have a wonderful and peaceful neighbors in Canada and Mexico. And to the extent that things were unfair, and I've heard officials about there are things that are unfair in trade. Well, deal with them. Talk to the other countries and say we think these 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 things are unfair, and let's be a little fairer. So I'm for free and fair trade, and sometimes it isn't fair. That's completely true. And there may be some things that are not fair on the other side too. But obviously, I haven't thought about that very much.
Should the United States take part in AIIB though, or some of the other RCEP, some of the agreements that China is pushing forward?
I would have, but I haven't looked at it in a long time, and if they're properly structured and properly governed, helping nations develop and regions develop is a good thing. So, if they're done badly, I wouldn't, but if they're done well, I would participate.
Yeah. How do you?
It's in America's interest and China's interest that we both do well. And it's not one against the other. That's a mistake when people look at like it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah. How do you see the U.S. economy right now? And also, I know in the second quarter, some of the trading revenue is taking a bit of a dip. I know that's the markets as opposed to the economy. It's a two-part question, but maybe we'll talk about the economy first. As the Fed embarks on maybe what's
I'll
likely
do
to
trading
be
for trading is like the weather. It goes up and down, and you can guess it and predict it, and I think it's kind of a waste of time. I don't spend much time doing that. To me, when we do trading, we serve clients around the world with prices, execution, discipline, and of course, if you say over 20 years, it's going to go up because the financial assets of the world are going to go up. What it's going to do next week or next month, I couldn't possibly tell you. And the U.S. economy has been chugging along at just under 2% growth for 8 years. It's a very long recovery. It's a weak recovery. It's about half of the average recovery. And so I think, and there's no great weak spot in the American economy, so I think if we make wise policy decisions around, which will take a while, corporate tax, infrastructure, regulatory reform, and other things, I think we could grow the economy more. And I wrote about it in my chairman's letter. I feel quite strong about it. I don't think we're relegated to slow growth forever.
Yeah, how about China's pushing infrastructure? What needs to be done in the United States for infrastructure?
I made the point in my chairman's letter, we haven't built a major airport in 20 years. I'm told it takes 10 years to get the average permits to build one bridge. We haven't built a bridge in New York City. I mean, we're building one now at Tappan Zee. It's the first one in like 50 years. I just came from Hong Kong. I mean, it's embarrassing. America, the can-do nation, should get back to building and constructing, and it's permitting, it's rules, it's requirements. We just got to get back to a can-do attitude about building infrastructure that fits our country, and we're getting behind, and we shouldn't. And it damages growth.